And now Dennis Bradley will say a few words.
Hello. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word. In Saturday's version of the Irish Times, there was a short article about the power of words, about the creative power of words. There were a lot of very good quotations, but the one that struck me most was one from a Presbyterian theologian who said that through our conversation we create one another. Through our words we create one another. Declan loved words. He loved them in all their forms and in all their manifestations. He loved the written word. God looked to whoever is clearing the books. He loved them in the sung form of words. He was encyclopedic about music and about songs. McGinley's and the Bridge Bar. And he loved the spoken word. He loved the conversation. He loved the exploration. In a fairly early age, he ended up in Northland Centre, and he stayed there for, I suppose, the rest of his life, really. And Northlands stayed with him. And he found the power of words, and the healing power of words particularly, that we achieve our completeness, our wellness, our health, both physically and spiritually, in being able to express whom we are, how we are, to be able to explore the feelings that live deep inside us, and being able to put words on that. And he lived it through being there, and he lived it through working there, and joining the committee that ran the place and managed the place, in becoming a member of staff there, becoming a CEO there, becoming the chairman of Northland Centre. In many ways, he was the co-creator of Northlands. Because words create. Words make that which is good, good. And then the diagnosis came. The diagnosis came that it wasn't good. And down the road in Costa, and out the road in the Roasted Bean, myself and Mary, who's my wife, and Declan, passed a lot of hours talking and facing in to what the diagnosis was, and facing it honestly and openly and serenely. And he took us all, me and Mary and a couple of my children, and he said, you have to see in Callian Cuan down in Lifford Cinema. So we went to Callian Cuan and we got a Kimberley biscuit. Those of you who saw the film will understand why we got a Kimberley biscuit. And we talked about Callian Cuan, and we talked about death, and we talked particularly about life. Because those were among the most life-enhancing hours that I have spent in the last 40 years. It was about sorrow, it was about departing, it was about parting, it was about ending, but it was full of life. It was full of the knowledge that it's good to talk, that it's good to be open, that it's good to share. It doesn't take all the fear away, doesn't take all the sorrow away, but it transforms it. It creates it into a different thing. It creates it into a different experience. And that was a mighty, mighty privilege. And then the sickness moved to Ahiyarn. And me and Mary, on our first time journeying to Ahiyarn, got lost on the Cairn Road. And I will never be lost again on the Cairn Road and where that cottage stands, where Declan spent his last months. Because as Paul said in the Philippians, it was everything that was good. It was everything that was wholesome. It was everything that was life-giving. It was a blessing to be there. In my imagination, that small cottage will be the symbol and the image of the most wholesome, the most amazing living and dying that I have ever experienced. In Declan's months in Northland Centre, he actually contributed to a short series of talks about how we face into life and how we face and try to achieve health and well-being. And that tape, 40 years later, is still being used there. That was the power of those words and the power of his story and the power of his ability to tell that story. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And Declan, sometimes when I think of Declan, I think of the two Declans. I really can't split them. And the two Declans created a montage of poetry, of Declan's poetry. And those of you who will have the pleasure in the coming weeks and years to see it, then you will come to some understanding of how important and how noble that was. And I think some of the poetry is incredibly good. But when I think of Declan, and when I will think of Declan in the future, I will think of two things. I will think of his nobility in facing death. I will think of his openness, his sharing of his feelings, some fears, not great, some anticipation, interesting, but the nobility of all of that. And I suppose mostly I think of that cottage in Ahiyarn and the nobility of that, the sheer love, the sheer beauty of that sharing, that caring. It has been a pleasure to be part of Declan's life, and a greater pleasure to be part of his death. Thank you.